Welcome to The Mothers-in-Law, a podcast exploring the demanding world of being a mother and a lawyer. Join my mom, Carrie Foliani, as she shares real-life stories and practical tips to help you find joy and balance in your life. Let's embark on this journey of community and support together. This show is sponsored by General Counsel West, a law firm that supports companies transforming healthcare comprised of mothers and fathers practicing law.
Welcome back to the Mothers-in-Law, the podcast where we explore what it really looks like to build a meaningful career while raising a family. Today's episode is one that I have been especially excited to bring you because we are diving into data that finally puts numbers, nuances, and credibility behind what so many lawyer-patient parents, especially mothers, have felt intuitively for years. I am joined by two incredibly impressive contributors, Stephanie Scharf and Bobbi Liebenberg. They are two leaders in the legal profession and the minds behind the landmark ABA Parenthood in the Legal Profession study, along with numerous other studies. This particular study was a national effort, and it drew responses from 8,000 lawyers that really focused in on examining how parenthood, not just gender, shapes careers in law. I'll be honest, their findings confirm some very hard truths. That motherhood still carries a measurable penalty, that caregiving disproportionately impacts women's advancement and compensation, and that flexibility, while essential, comes with unintended consequences for visibility and leadership. That this conversation is not just about what's broken, but about what works, and we talk about actionable strategies for all of us to figure out how to navigate our careers more intentionally and begin to shift that narrative so that being a parent isn't recognized just as a liability, but also as a leadership strength. So I am beyond thrilled for what is to come this morning and to share with everybody these two wonderful legends that have really taken some really challenging topics and helped us all see and are also calling us to act to make this much better for moms and for lawyers. Thank you so much, Bobbi and Stephanie, for participating in the Mothers-in-Law podcast.
Well, we're passionate about this subject, and we're really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you, Carrie, for your really gracious and generous introduction. And it is definitely a pleasure to be here. And we're very happy to speak on a topic that's near and dear to Bobbi and me, how women navigate their careers, what impediments they face, and most importantly, not just what lawyers can do, but what law firms and corporations and bar associations can do to help really eliminate the impediments that mothers face much more frequently than fathers. Bobbi and I are both lawyers and mothers. We had many challenges in those dual roles at a time when part-time was not an option for several reasons. As we navigate our careers, we saw many situations where women could have stayed at work and could have advanced at the same rate as men. But the structures and standards and policies were dominated by values that were not a good fit for parenting. I remember I was in a large firm for my beginning years as an associate and a partner, and slowly I saw women leave, like all the women in my class basically left. And when you asked the senior partners, well, why is she leaving? They say, oh, she wants to go home, take care of her kids. And when you asked the mother why she was leaving, she basically said, I can't take it here. I'm going to another job. So that's certainly stuck in my mind. And I know Bobbi has had a number of experiences as a mother also that she may want to bring us in the loop about.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. I think there were two really important experiences that I had that influenced why we wanted to do this study. First, I had my first child when I was a second-year law student, which, by the way, is a great time to have a child. It was not great, though, interviewing. I had finished a clerkship on the Fourth Circuit in Richmond, Virginia. At the time, there were only about 10 practicing women lawyers in the entire city. And I was asked questions, including did I have children? How many children did I intend to have? Why should I be hired? Because it was clear I would ultimately just quit and go take care of my family. And although that was many years ago, in our study, we found that these are still questions that permeate in terms of how women get hired, and this really deep-seated cultural and societal conflict between the ideal worker, the ideal lawyer who's available 24/7 to their clients and to their firms or their other legal employers, and the ideal mother who is always available to her children, puts women in just a catch 22. And then the next experience I had that also influenced how we approached this study was I was at two big law firms. In my second firm, where I did make partner, I was on the associates committee. And I got a chance to see my associate evaluations because I was on the committee. I have three children, and there was a notation in my second year. I had to miss a client meeting because I had to take one of my children to the emergency room. So it never happened again. I was in my second year, and yet when I looked through my evaluations, year after year after year till I made partner, there was a comment about the fact that was I committed enough to be a partner at this firm since, I had missed this major client meeting because of my children. And again, and we're going to talk about this perception of the lack of commitment that women, mothers have because they have children is something that permeates throughout our research.
That is devastating. It's devastating to hear those stories, and I know we think things have changed, right? Like, I think I hear that, I'm like, "That would never happen," right? But I've actually also heard that happening even
Yeah.
to this day, and that, I'm excited to hear how we're gonna solve this, but I really appreciate, your tips. I think both of you, did you both have your children in law school? Which I think is a fascinating
I just
I,
had one in law school.
I
Then
had one in law school also, in the middle of tax class, I might add.
That's
I never liked taxes.
well, then your child did you a favor. That's what a good
and then
kid.
I
Sorry.
had another one when I was an associate, and then I had my third when I was a partner. And to Stephanie's point, there were no part-time. You either worked full-time or you did not work. And there
Yeah.
were no policies about taking parental leave. And it's one thing I always tell younger lawyers why you should aspire to become a leader, because you can frame policy. And when I got pregnant, I drafted the parental leave policy and other policies for my firm.
Great. Yes. I mean, that's incredible. That's a good note to anyone out there that's struggling to take that on. If you find a deficit, and I know there's a lot of people out here that will help you with that. I think
Yes.
I think one of the thing is you can draft the policy, but getting it to be implemented, respected, honored, I feel like that's part of the barrier conversation that makes our environment as difficult still is today, despite, the reports that have told us this is not working.
Well, one of the things that we found in the survey, and we're going to get to that in a minute, was that those policies actually are good for employers to implement. It means they keep talented people, both, yes, for sure, mothers, but also fathers. So it's rational to implement policies that are parent friendly. Should we turn to the study?
Sure, let's go. That sounds
Let's
great.
go to the next slide. What we're seeing is the cover page, really, of the first national study of parenting and legal careers that was ever done. It was something that was sponsored by the American Bar Association Commission on Women. And we did the work. Bobbi and I, we had a third investigator, Paulette Brown, who focused on focus groups. And Bobbi and I were responsible for the survey and its design and implementation and analysis and that part of the report. The report is free online at americanbar.org, and it's called Legal Careers of Parents and Child Caregivers. And we were very happy after we fielded the survey and got the results. First, because we got a very large number of survey respondents, over 8,000. And they came from all practice settings, law firms, in-house law departments, public interest groups, not-for-profits, the judiciary, military lawyers even, and some academics. And it was a nicely representative sample of the profession. The median age of respondents was 42, and many were at the age when they still were in their prime childcare years. We got a much larger percentage of women than men. That probably says something about the interests of women in particular in this topic. 77% of respondents were women and 23% were men. But in the analysis, we did weight it to population statistics. So our statistics are representative of the legal population as a whole. And we also got a good mix proportional to the profession as a whole of racial and people with racial and ethnic identities. And 84% of the people who answered this survey were married or living with a committed partner. So we had a nice mix of people, very good data set for analysis. And let me turn to Bobbi to talk about a set of findings that are very interesting.
I'll also add, if you have trouble getting the study from the ABA, you can go to our consulting group, the Red B group, and also download it for free, and it may be easier to find. So I encourage people to do this. It's really an important study. And as Stephanie said, it's the first of its kind that has looked at this issue. And I think to your point, Carrie, what's important about data is that we all know these experiences are happening. And by having the data, it just confirms you're not crazy. Um, we're about to on this next slide, which really I always say this is the slide where we could do a drinking game because it has some pretty depressing statistics. But it's clear when you look at this slide that mothers have way more negative experiences than fathers. So let's just drill down a little bit on the data. So, regardless of practice setting, which I think is important, it didn't matter if mothers were in law firms, were in academia, were in nonprofits, they all had these experiences, which were mothers received, 61% of mothers received demeaning comments about being a working parent. 60% were perceived as less committed to their careers, something I personally had experience with. 43% of mothers lacked access to business development opportunities compared to just 20% of fathers. 41% of mothers were perceived as less competent than 15% of fathers. 37% of mothers were denied a salary increase or a bonus compared to 22% of fathers. We also found that mothers, way more than fathers, were denied access to sponsors and mentors because they had children. um, Individuals, other lawyers, would not consider them for mentorship or sponsorship because, again, I think it's this fear that they were going to leave the law firm. Mothers had trouble being assigned to important matters or being assigned to matters with travel. And again, this is something I hear all of the time where it may even be that it's not conscious that you're not assigned to this matter that requires travel. It's, I'm thinking for you, you've got these kids. I know you may not want to travel. And as I always said, as someone with 3 children, a night in a hotel where I could order room service and watch television was a night I was willing to do, right?
Sitting in an airplane by yourself working, that is like like
Right.
we'd all sign up for that. And that's a great point.
Right. So
Um,
don't make assumptions that because someone has children, they may not want this assignment or they may not want to travel. 36% of our mothers reported being denied or overlooked for advancement or promotion, compared to 22% of fathers, and 22% of mothers, compared to just 3% of fathers, were advised to stay home or put their careers on hold after having a child. And I want to also explain about our survey. While we had focus groups, in addition to our survey questions, we had a number of open-ended questions. So many of the comments that you read in the report, and we're gonna amplify some of them, but I encourage people to read these comments. They're heartbreaking, what
no,
mothers have experienced at work. And I think they really provide really important flavor and color in terms of our study. Only 14% of mothers didn't have at least one of these negative experience. Only 14%, compared to 31% of fathers who had never had a negative experiences. So these negative experiences have a domino effect. If you're not committed, if you're not perceived as competent, if you're not getting the big important matters, it's going to impact your compensation and your advancement. And it amounts to really a death by 1,000 cuts, which ultimately makes women want to leave their law
absolutely.
firms and even the profession.
No, and I think that, and when you say that, the death by 1,000 cuts really triggers, because it's been really heartbreaking, actually, even as part of this podcast, to sit with people who actually, some for the very first time, have ever shared and
Right.
reflected on some of the poignant questions that you're targeting in your study, where they're sitting across from me and we're asking, what was hard about this? And they process. And a lot of times, what happens, or what I've noticed, I should say, is all those things, not being confident, not feeling confident, leads into some mental health issues that really not only impact that woman, of course, but impacts her family in a profound way. Because it's really hard to be an awesome mom when you feel like crap at work. And that's where I think formulating a plan to mitigate that, to help people feel confident, strong. You're doing an amazing job. You're going to get these opportunities because you're an amazing lawyer, without regard to being overlooked for different opportunities because you're a mom. So I think that death by 1,000 cuts thing, it is cumulative. Sometimes we don't pay attention to the little cuts. And even I think your study calls us to kind of open our eyes and see what those look like along the way, rather than waiting to be like, I'm out of here. Because that's kind of where I think a lot of women end up.
Yeah,
So
and I'll say we're going to go to the next slide. Stephanie's going to, but this death by 1,000 cuts is amplified by everything that mothers are doing. So Stephanie, you should dwell on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to add to this is it's not just the women who have children who are burning out and have difficulty having the same levels of well-being. We heard terribly sad comments from women who said, well, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer and have a career, so I thought I'd put off having children. And by the time they made partner, they couldn't have children. And it was so painful and so sad that that's the choice they had to make.
yeah.
And it's not a choice that men make. very often, if at all. And it's really very visible for women.
No, I really, that's what you bring up. I was one of those women. I waited until I was 36, and it was one of the darkest periods of my life. I, went into clinical intervention, etc. But I feel for those women because they live and carry that absence of something they wanted because they were pursuing something else that matters as well. So, you know, it calls me to remember I really want to do something to address that, because I think it's such a gap, because a lot of those women that we want those people that have children and to have the experience and to put more people like that on the planet. That's the other part of it. So it's a real tender tension. But I do remember I had a lawyer at one of the big law firms, and I was 27. She bought me a book that said it was about infertility. And I was like, lady, I don't need this book. But she was trying to warn me, because I was a go-getter. You're going to miss out unless you plan ahead. And it was ironic to me that I suffered through that experience. And my heart goes out to women that are on the track and it doesn't happen for them. Because that's an extra grief that we lose, in addition to all the other things that you mentioned that you've uncovered in this study, right? It's an extra kind of negative consequence of being a professional woman.
So let's go to the next slide, because Bobbi and I have studied the work that mothers do versus fathers do when they're not practicing law. And this was our latest research on this. And it's probably no surprise to many people in the audience, but women actually do double duty. Mothers do double duty compared to fathers. And as shown in this slide, mothers overwhelmingly bear the burdens of childcare and household responsibilities. And obviously, this double duty also impacts the careers of mothers as compared to fathers. So, for example, you can see that mothers are more than twice as likely to cook family meals. Mothers are more than 5 times as likely to attend extracurricular activities. Mothers overwhelmingly, compared to fathers, 70% compared to something like 8%, arrange for medical care, overwhelmingly help with homework, deal with childcare in the evening, deal with childcare in the daytime, leave work for childcare when there's an emergency or even when it's more routine. They leave work for childcare, and they overwhelmingly arrange for childcare. And what's interesting is, it's clear that mothers also carry the mental load. It's not just physical, and time. It's the mental load of arranging for these responsibilities. And it certainly creates additional stress and time pressure on women lawyers with children. There's a little bit, we don't have it up on the screen, but there's a little bit of women are from Venus and men are from Mars to this data as well, because we asked in the survey whether the work that is done for childcare and household care is shared with your husband or your partner. And we asked women that, is this work shared? And we asked men that, is this work shared with your wife or your partner in the household? And the gender differences were really striking. So, for example, 59% of fathers of dependent children reported that they shared responsibilities for arranging for child care and for household care. But only about half of their spouses felt that way. About half of mothers felt that their partners shared child care responsibilities. In the same vein, a lot of partners said they shared responsibility for leaving work early to take care of children's needs. But mothers said, no, that's not shared. I do that.
Right.
So it kind of reminds us of a very famous comment from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was herself the mother of 2 children while she practiced law. And she said, Women will have achieved true equality when men share with them the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. And we still have a ways to go where there is equality in the household, which of course has a tremendous impact on how your career progresses. So let me turn to Bobbi, and she's
I
going
just
to.
want to add to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg story because there's a very famous story where the school called her about, I think it was her son who had had some kind of issue at school, and she point blank said, there are two of us, and you should call my husband as well. So I think to her point, this is a shared responsibility, and I think we wanted not just women to read this report, but men and fathers and partners and managers so that they can see what women have to undergo in terms of this balancing of trying to fulfill both their professional and their family responsibilities.
It's so true. It's hard because I wasn't a lot of women have that I've talked to were much more thoughtful when they had a child about these things. And even like a small shift, like I just was absorbing this idea that I am exactly the woman you just described. Like I do a lot and all many, many times. But for fun, I put my husband as the first person to call. School list. And he's a school teacher, God bless him. So he can't really leave 20 kids by himself, but at least he can know, that there was an issue. But it's really setting it up for success so that there is some shift in. I don't think I'd like to think that it will be someday more equal, but even the smaller shifts or micro shifts towards like, hey, why don't you take care of all birthday parties? Like that is amazing. Like little things. So I think, when I hear data like that, I immediately is like, well, and you just described me and how can I let go of? Because some of us feel these lawyers, to be honest, I am one of them. I like to think like I can do it all, right? Like I got this. I know how to navigate this. So there is an aspect of it that is I do take responsibility for, but I think teaching us how to relinquish, and I think having our partners read the article would be step one to say, hey, what do you think about this? That might be a good next step.
And also, I think to let go. Like, it may not be the perfect cupcakes that come to your kid's, birthday party, or it may not be the perfect way you would do the wash. But,
Yep.
people won't share unless you give them the responsibility and then just delegate it, just like you
Yeah.
do your work.
Yeah. It's not smart. It's a good one.
Talking about sort of the death by a thousand cuts and the impact of that, Carrie, we actually constructed a burnout and stress index. And I think it's one of the first times that has been done as well. And we based it on the series of questions that are reflected in this slide, which says stress and burnout in firms. And I think, our hypothesis going into it was given everything, sort of the negative comments women were experiencing and everything that they were trying to do to juggle their family and household responsibilities. Of course, they were stressed and burnt out. What we didn't know was how much this was exacting a toll. So if you look at this slide, 70% of mothers felt overwhelmed with things they had to do compared to just 41% of fathers. 69% of mothers experienced stress at work compared to 52% of fathers. 74% of mothers experienced stress because of parenting responsibilities compared to 54% of fathers, and 65% of mothers reported feeling like their day never ends compared to 41% of fathers. And I know we have all experienced that, like there's just too much to do. On the Men Are From Mars, Women from Venus questions, we had a bunch of those with our stress and burnout index as well. And again, you saw this huge gender disconnect. So 40% of fathers believe they're doing a good job balancing their work and home responsibilities compared to just 17% of mothers. So, again, a huge disconnect between what is happening. And we do know from other research that even on the weekend, for example, when there's allegedly supposed to be some leisure time, mothers are doing still far more of the responsibilities than fathers, and getting that recognition of, what is this exacting on the stress and burnout. And again, in the new catalyst survey that just came out, that showed when you look at just women in the workforce, over 500,000 of women ages 24 to 45 left the workforce last year from January to August 2025. They pointed to the fact of lack of parental of employer resources to help them with their parenting responsibilities, and stress and burnout. So this is not just confined to the law. If you look at the McKinsey reports, women in the workplace, this is going on where mothers are feeling this every single day.
Definitely. Oh, it definitely resonates. It's just the thing that I struggle with is that they're doing all of it and feeling horrible about it, you know?
We're getting
That
to them. We have data on that too.
I don't let anyone's thunder, but it's just like daunting to me.
This actually reflects some data we gathered about whether parenting has, or being a mother or father, has a negative or positive impact on legal careers. And as you can see, 48% of mothers compared to 21% of fathers feel that having children had a negative impact on their career. I mean, another way to put it is more than twice as many mothers as fathers felt that children had a negative impact on their career. And we can see, even from the data that we showed you here today, there are reasons why. You're doing double duty. You just can't do it all. And you stress out, and maybe you don't get the exercise or the self-care that you need. And maybe you're not visiting with your friends, and you never go out and relax. And it's kind of a cumulative effect that really does end up having a negative impact for many mothers on their career. They get sidetracked, they don't get promoted, they have to change jobs. Lots of changes and nuances that don't affect fathers in the same way, because one of the things we found is that 33% of fathers compared to 19% of mothers felt that having children had a positive impact on their career. And it made them more human, and it made them more accessible, and it made them friendlier and softer, not just all hard edged. So, what the same life experience that can be positive for men is not always experienced as positive for women. And it is a problem. And it's a problem that, as we will see later, can be addressed by employers and by bar associations, not just individuals.
Yeah, it reminds me though, when I was about to get engaged, I went to Catholic school growing up. The headmistress, Sister Barbara, was over at my parents' house and said, and she wasn't very excited for me. And I was like, and she pulled me over into the living room. I know exactly where we were standing. And she says, "Are you sure about this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I want to get married and I want to have children." He's like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Because this whole thing, it's not that great for the women." And I was like so taken aback by that, to have a nun, okay, who obviously chose a different path, tell me that, and every once in a while it hits me, because it is a struggle that I don't think that my husband's experienced the same way that I have. And maybe it's in the way I've done it. if I'm being reflective or because of some of the constraints or the realities of the environment that we are working in. So I always pause and I'm like, your data, Sister Barbara would probably give you a thumbs up. Like, I knew that already.
And in fact, we referenced our prior research of walking out the door, which looks at why women lawyers, well, all lawyers practicing 15 plus years, so looking at sort of more senior lawyers, what was the disproportionate rate of attrition for women lawyers versus male lawyers? And the number one reason why experienced women lawyers leave their law firms is because of the stress of taking care of children. And of course their children are older. These are not, most of them have been practicing 15 plus years, but they were, again, that was the number one reason, which I think was something that was surprising to us. And I think what's also really important to emphasize, this is not because of a lack of ambition or they're opting out. This is because of the structural features that are in many legal organizations that don't support parents, that don't support mothers with children, that are driving them out the door.
Yeah. Well, it
So
makes
I'm going
sense.
to look at on the slide, to your point, Carrie. Again, given the stress, given the negative experience, given all the anecdotal comments we received, it was not surprising that mothers were 3 times more likely than fathers, 48% versus 17%, to feel guilty about working full time. And I experienced that when you would drop your child off at daycare or with a babysitter, just that feeling of just like, and as soon as you drop them off, they were fine, but just it stayed with you all day, worrying about that, feeling guilty about not really being present at work, not really being present at home. And how do you balance that? And then 48% of mothers, as Stephanie said, reported postponing having children because of career concerns, compared to 26% of fathers. And it was not only mothers who postponed, but actually after they had children, what were the kinds of comments that they received from their colleagues? So I'm just going to emphasize two of them. One woman said, having children was discouraged in our office because it impacts productivity. Another one said, just she was told, I would be iced out by the partners and my work would dry up if I had children. So, this again is what women have to balance and what they have to face in making these decisions.
Yeah. So that makes it's amazing. I'm excited to get to the part where you tell us what to do and make it better. I do think it's good to pause and recognize, you know, that these are these are not isolated instances. There are 8,000 people sharing different stories, different perspectives that led into this data, which I appreciate that exists just to support how we're going to make it better.
So one of the things that Bobbi and I have written about and have written about in this report rather extensively is the importance of flexibility in work arrangements. And we're very aware that there is a growing trend to require lawyers to return to the office not just 3 days a week, but often 4 or 5 days a week. And given the findings in our report about parenting, in office requirements particularly impact, and not in a good way, impact women with children and may impact the ability of employers to really retain women with children. Because what we found is really a need for flexibility about the required number of in-office days. So, for example, one of our findings was the positive impact of allowing hybrid and remote working. And there was a great positive impact on individual well-being. So the ability to balance work and family obligations had a very positive impact, not just on mothers, by the way, that on mothers and fathers. 76% of mothers reported that if they could work in a hybrid way that really enhanced their well-being. And 74% of fathers with dependent children had the same reaction. We need the ability to balance work and family obligations in a hybrid way that works for us. Now, it's not all up because there are some prices that individuals pay for hybrid working. A majority of both mothers and fathers of dependent children, especially fathers, were concerned about diminished professional networking, and about half of fathers and mothers of children, dependent children, were concerned about feelings of isolation. But overall, we think that just automatically saying, well, it's good for the business for everybody to come in 5 days a week. Well, it is and it isn't good for the business.
Yeah.
It may be good because people are there, but it's not so good if over time you lose highly trained, experienced lawyers who say, you know what? I don't have to work like this anymore. There are other places I can go. And they would go.
I think also you have to look at who's making this policy, right? It's generally older men who have either stay-at-home wives or their children are grown, and they're the ones saying, we need to be in the office 5 days a week. And I think the growing research about younger workers, and there was just a 2025 Work Monitor report that showed that younger workers will trade money to have better work life balance, to have the ability to be home. And that is something that gives me more optimism. I saw it with my own son, who wanted to take paternity leave. I think a lot of younger men do want to share these responsibilities more equally, and are doing so. And they actually face the same kind of biases because a man who takes paternity leave is acting against gender stereotype and therefore faces the same biases that many women face. So we have to encourage everyone to take their parental leave. We have to encourage both mothers and fathers to be active. This is good for their children, and it's actually good for their places of employment.
Yeah. I think that's an aspect of this that is important to draw into it, that especially, having your partner be able to support from the get-go and to see this as a joint project of sorts. Like, there is value, there's tremendous value in that. And so I do think there is that opportunity, to support that decision for the fathers as well. I think because it does. I'm even, and generationally, there is like, what is the dad doing? And I always am like, I hope everything, my fingers crossed. But it's another aspect that really we need to be sensitive to and encourage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're getting to, I think, the part you're really going to enjoy, Carrie, and that's the next slide, which is, again, as Stephanie said, and we're going to talk about this also in best practices. But actually, what's very unique about this report is that we actually have data that shows that if law firms and other legal employers institute the types of programs that are reflected on this slide, they will be successful at advancing women into leadership. For those in law firms, they will be successful at advancing women into equity partnership. So the question is, why aren't more employers and law firms doing this? Because the data supports there are ways to ensure that you're going to have women all through the pipeline, from the beginning to the middle to the end, so that you have sufficient leaders in legal organizations that can take the charge of matters and be first chairs at trial and leads on deals. And if you don't do that, there is going to be that vacuum that Stephanie talked about. So if you look at these policies, mentoring and sponsorship program, 74% of women with reported that their organization that had this policy was successful. written succession policies. Again, 72% of women reported if you did that, that again would be a great policy to advance women in leadership. Leadership and management training, implicit bias training with respect to this pervasive motherhood bias. There's deep research that shows that just an indication of being a mother can result in not getting a call back for a job and being offered less in salary. So, again, this ideal worker, ideal lawyer versus the ideal mother is very much entrenched in our society and in our culture. But these policies work. We hope that our audience members will take them to their bar associations, they'll take them to their employers, and they'll say, look, we've got data. If we do and we can implement these programs, you're going to see that women will stay and they'll advance.
And I will say, I mean,
And
we've talked a little bit about this, but like our firm is built to support working parents. We call ourselves mothers and fathers practicing law. So I get very validated in a lot of even looking at your checklist, your recommendations. And I'm also going to make sure that we are going that extra mile. But I also want to just speak to the audience to tell them that we have built a very successful firm. It's been around for 15 years. There's flexibility. There is support for you as a parent. Our firm retreats are percolate around giving people encouragement and support to, find themselves while they're being a parent. I mean, to me, it's so natural. But if you're at a firm right now that doesn't, now I'm happy to share some of these ideas because they're actually not really significant lifts, but it's about honoring the humanity and the place and the season that the parents that are at your firm are at. And that is something that has provided not just tremendous value as having a successful firm, but there is no greater loyalty
Mhm.
than a working parent who feels seen, heard, and respected. I haven't seen it yet. And I feel blessed for people I get to work with because we've set something up for them that supports where they're at. And I think
And
it's
we need to
possible.
advertise firms that are successful doing this. That because, people will say, oh no, this can't be done. And, your firm is a proof of that. I believe my firm, I know Stephanie feels that about her firm as well, is that there are firms that are living by their values and implementing cultures that really provide this kind of support. And that is the way to practice law and be happy, I think.
I agree. I agree.
one thing that I also wanted to add to what Bobbi was saying is these were top policies in our survey, but there were a lot of other policies that lawyers found helped promote women into leadership roles and helped promote women who are mothers into partner roles. And one of the things we've learned through our other research is the best way to find out what policies will work is to ask people. Don't just talk to members of the management committee, talk to everybody who could be involved and benefited or not when you're thinking about a policy. Some policies, for example, an affinity group for mothers or on-ramp programs after having children so you come back slowly, or subsidies for child care or family care, or subsidies for tutoring. And there are many others in our report. And one of the reasons why we're very keen on talking to people, not just guessing or talking to your senior leader peers, is in walking out the door, we asked women, senior women, and asked managing partners and senior men, well, how successful is your firm in advancing women into partnership, in putting women into leadership roles, and several other questions like that. And 90% of the managing partners and senior men thought they were doing great. But when we asked the senior women, only about between 48 and 52% of senior women thought the firm was doing great. And that's because people aren't talking across to each other and talking across kind of implicit barriers the way they should be. So the best way for a firm or a company or an agency to figure out, well, what should we do? We know we have a problem. We're not keeping women. We're not keeping mothers. What should we do? Talk to the people who you want to help, and they'll give you lots of ideas.
Yeah, and that's one question. What are the questions? Like, do you have a checklist or a hit list of questions, even for our firms, like that we feel like, again, I guess technically I'm sitting in a management position that I should be asking just to make super sure there aren't opportunities for improvement? Like, is there a list that you would lead us to, or maybe I can draft one up and we can all look at it or figure out, like, because
Yeah,
sometimes that's a barrier because people
yeah,
don't.
that's a good point. And the Red Bee Group does work for like that for firms, and we do advise firms about the best way to communicate with and take on and adopt and implement policies, and we track it over time to make sure it's really working. And if it isn't, we advise people on how to pivot.
Again, I think Carrie, it's a great question about what are the questions we should be asking, what are the best practices we should be looking at. And again, we encourage all of the audience to go to our best practices, which is something that we do in all of our reports. But our first recommendation is that you need leadership from the top, and you need leadership who are engaged and who actually are role models for this type of behavior. So they're not asking, where you were when you left to go pick up your children. They're actually also talking about, I had to leave a meeting because my child was in the emergency room, and this is how I handled it. I had to go and make sure that my child got to the doctor because my wife is also working and I want to do that. So having leaders actually be held accountable, that they implement policies that actually do support parents. We've just identified some of those, and that they actually are accountable for ensuring that they're being implemented and there's someone looking at them. They're tweaking them if they're not working how they want, but they're actually looking at how they can be good leaders and stewards for parents, not just mothers, but for fathers, for mothers, and that they're role models. And they need transparent goals and benchmarks. And then I'm going to also say, I think what's really important as a policy are flexible work schedules. We know from all of our research that without flexibility, women are going to either leave to look for jobs that have that flexibility, or they're going to leave the profession. But you need to have that flexibility to be able to take care and perform. And we also know from our data that it does not, and I want to stress, does not impact productivity. It doesn't impact the quality of the work. And I would argue you actually have better mental health and you have better results because people start working at like 7 o'clock in the morning. They don't commute for 2 hours, and
Right.
they work when it makes sense. They can take off to take their child to the doctor and not be guilty about it, and come back and work when it makes sense. So flexibility to me is one of the most important recommendations, I think, that should be implemented.
I agree. I think the one thing you weaved it in there, but I want to emphasize it because it's something that we really encourage, even with our team. It's guilt-free flexibility,
Right.
because sometimes you get the flexibility, but then it's not enjoyable because you feel like you always have to be on. And you are right. Like, days start at 6 a.m. when you have flexibility because you can get a couple hours of work in before you wake your kids up sometimes. But when you're with your kids, be with them. Like,
Right.
be with them, be present, and not feeling like, oh, I should be looking at my phone, checking if I get an email. I mean, that's part of it that I think I've had to learn over time, because even our firm's 100% remote. And in the beginning, I would be rushing home after music class to make sure I
Hmm.
could send the emails. Well, in 10 more minutes, enjoy
Right.
the ride home, right? But it's
Right.
that balance thing, and really training yourself to be guilt-free in that flexibility. I think that's really important for people to know.
And as firm leaders, What is really an emergency? When do you have to send an email over the weekend? You can time your email so it can get sent out on Monday. If you want to write it over the weekend, fine. But be
Yeah.
respectful of the flexibility schedule, like you were saying. You don't impose on weekends and after hours in the evening unless there's a real emergency. And I know I left my big law firm when I was at a camp visitation for my son, and a senior partner was having a panic attack over nothing that couldn't have waited. And I spent the entire camp visit. At that time, there were no cell phones in the camp office on the phone trying to calm him down. And the next day, I decided I was leaving the firm.
Yeah. It's those moments. I think that's really like enough is enough moment
Yeah,
that because you and sometimes it depends on the lens you look through it is I can't get that time back, right? That I spent in the office at the camp
right.
site. It was an emergency. So I think defining emergency, I think another thing that we do in our firm is don't send emails on Sunday. Like like you said, delay them, whatever. Just give that. Just or pick Saturday, Sunday, whatever day you want. But it's like pick a day where it's just like it's a day that's not a requirement to be present
Yeah.
in that space. So I love that.
Stephanie.
Well, we have a couple of other items here. One is greater parental resources and support for both women and men, for mothers and fathers. And sometimes a firm will say, well, that's expensive. And again, it's what you consider expensive. Is it more expensive to provide some additional parental leave policies? Or is it more expensive that you've trained someone for 3 or 4 years and they get sick of what they're not getting from the firm and they leave?
Yeah.
So, to us, the benefits are on the side of giving more generous parental resources and support. We were happy to see that a large number of men now take advantage of parental leave. I think the number was that it's something like tripled from 5 years ago, or maybe at this point, 6 or 7 years ago. There are benefits to on site emergency childcare, benefits to tutoring stipends. Senior lawyers can have a mentoring group of more junior lawyers who are parents and learn how to best strategize career goals and how to navigate successfully either working child issues or return to the office after parental leave. And employers that have resources with respect to childcare are highly favored by parents, both men and women. And so we think that, again, there should be a conversation, an open conversation in each workplace. What can we do? What does it cost? That's a fair question. What does it cost short term? What is our gain? What can we do to support long-term careers for parents, both men and women? And there's another type of program that we're high on, and that is training programs, development programs to support careers of women with children. And that's something that Bobbi talked about earlier. And it's in our report in detail what kinds of services and what kinds of support are needed to succeed. And I come back to that because that's really in the hands of the employer.
Yeah.
What can we do to help people succeed? Again, what can employers do to retain and advance women with children? And we think it's very important for people, firms, employers, organizations to use metrics to measure change and gauge success. You should not be afraid of data. It's the most convincing way to know if you're doing what you intended to do as an employer and if it's having an impact on the people in your workplace. So maybe you'd want to track the rate of attrition of women and men with children. Maybe you want to track who's taking parental leave and how long, and what is their reaction to it, and how do they come back. Maybe you want to look at what happens when people come back from parental leave. What kind of assignments do they get? What kind of prospects are people saying they have for partnership? What is their compensation change over time? And you may also want to look at the impact, if your firm allows it, of hybrid work on parents when they come back from parental leave, or on new parents even if they don't go on leave, if somehow that's making a difference. Sometimes what we've seen is that, and we saw a lot of comments about it in our research, when I came back from parental leave, I was not allowed to fill in the blank, or I did not receive these opportunities. One is I was never put on a case anymore where I had to travel. I was never put on a case where they thought there would be intense trial work. I was never put on a case where there was an intense deal. The perception of what happens when you're a mother, unfortunately, trickles down to the kinds of assignments you get. So we think it's very important as a part of metric to see, are people getting assignments equally, whether they're parents or not, whether they're fathers or mothers, and how does parenting change the types of assignments that people get. Bobbi, I know you want to talk about a few more things.
So I actually think having an on-ramp program, so that there is a planning when a woman takes time off for maternity, so that there's a plan when she comes back, and that you're not sort of just left out there. You come back, you're not getting the types of cases or assignments Stephanie just described. And there was a great quote in the report which talked about, our managing partner has been exceptionally supportive of attorneys at our firm during pregnancy, maternity leave, and upon return to work. Her philosophy is that if women are not supported during these times, they will leave the profession. Her outlook and support has made the difference in making the transitions related to having children while making a career feasible. So, again, going back to that leadership support, Carrie, talking about the firm philosophy and culture that your firm has created. When mothers and fathers feel supported, they will be loyal, they will stay, and they will work hard for themselves and for the firm.
And I think that it's really important to, even looking at some of the cost ratio that you were mentioning, Stephanie. It's like, even the small act of helping them set their children up for summer, that's always a task that is like overwhelming, especially when you have young kids, 50 outlets in different camps, this camp, who's picking up what time. Having someone step in and say, "Can I help you with that?" It's like those are small things that are life changing, and they will, to the point of that commentary, having someone support you through those initial phases is 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 such a smart idea from every angle. There's no reason not to do it, unless you just
Right.
haven't had the idea. And guess what? Thanks for listening, because today you have all these ideas. There's so many ways to make it better. And I know I don't want to cut short your presentation. I also want to be respectful of your time. But I do want to ask you, just to wrap up our time together, like, what does give you hope in light of all of the data that you've come across, all the stories, the anecdotes, the disappointments, quite honestly, that you've learned in the course of stepping out and doing this research? What helps us look towards something, even after the Catalyst data just came out, sharing that 500,000 people women left the workforce? What gives us hope that this can get better?
So I think programs like this, publicizing our report, and I think it is time to flip the narrative. We talk about the motherhood penalty all the time. Claudia Goldin won the Nobel Prize in economics looking at the wage disparity for mothers and fathers as a result of the motherhood penalty. To me, if I'm an employer, the employee I want is a mother, because who but a mother is laser focused on how to be efficient and get the job done? Who but a mother has empathy and can lead your teams? Who but a mother has the grit and resilience, no matter what, to overcome the challenge? And to me, we have to celebrate what mothers bring to the labor market. And we, as women and mothers, we have to be publicizing all of the amazing things that mothers can do if they get the support. They're supported by their firms and organizations. They're supported by their colleagues. They're supported by mentors, and that they stay in this wonderful profession.
I love that. That's a wonderful way to capture. And I think it's also a call to action as I sit here to taking even a greater role in highlighting the incredible women and mothers that I've gotten to come across in the course of this work and in my life and career. Because there are so many out there, but we're also a little bit on the humble and very busy side to sit and celebrate and show and share what this looks like and how it can be a wonderful thing and make you a better lawyer and a better impactor in this environment.
And I know Stephanie has words to close us out.
Hear what Stephanie has to say too.
So I'm going to close it out, but you may want to put what I'm about to say in a different part. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not quite as aspiring as what Bobbi and you said. So I believe that executives and senior partners and leaders are mostly rational. And if they look ahead to how society is changing, they are going to have to change their policies and practices. It's been several years now when over 50% of law school graduates are women. More and more, if all you're doing is promoting men into partnership, and let me just say white men into partnership, you're going to have a really narrow set of people who are leaders and partner level lawyering in your firm or leaders in your company. And there's been a ton of research that shows that diversity enhances results. So if you end up with a firm or a business where basically once someone gets to the first leadership level, like first year partner, they're looking around for a new job because they don't want to live like that anymore, you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. So I think that demography is going to be a big driver of change. And it's not just, I want to do the right thing. And it's not just, how can I make sure we have happy lawyers working here? It's, how are we going to survive if we are losing basically half the population of lawyers in America because we don't have policies and practices that suit them?
This is a call to action. And I just want to really thank you. I feel like we could definitely talk for a lot about these issues and the passion that you bring to the table. I just think that your research gives us something so powerful, like not just like the validation, but a roadmap. And I really hope that everyone listening, whatever role you're in, if you're a managing partner, if you are a new mom lawyer, that you take this to heart and that we all start moving towards creating an environment where being a mom and a parent and a lawyer is really celebrated and seen as a positive, and that our systemic changes that can be made support that. Because personally, I feel that I'm a much better lawyer because I am a mother. And I think that's something that is commonly shared. But I also recognize that a lot of women have really had it quite difficult in different environments that need to change to support what an incredible journey this has been. So I just heartfelt gratitude to both Bobbi and Stephanie for giving us your time and your wisdom. And I will definitely, share your reports and all the incredible data and and analytics that you are doing to support all of us working moms out there. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Thank you for
Thank
this
you.
conversation, Carrie. It's a great thing that you're doing. This is a fabulous podcast. Thank you.
And thank you for having us. We really enjoyed it. And kudos to you.
You've been listening to The Mothers-in-Law with Carrie Foliani. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found the insights and stories shared helpful as you navigate your own journey. I also hope that you enjoyed listening to my mother, not that I always do. For more resources, to connect with the community, and to continue exploring how to align your personal and professional life, visit www.themothersinlaw.com. We appreciate you.